Hi everyone and welcome to episode 3 of our Hermod Plus tutorial series. Today we are diving into track mode. I'll walk you through the key concepts and show you some of the most important settings with musical examples along the way. I won't go over every single setting, but I'll leave a link to the manual if you want to dig deeper. Let's kick things off with a short patch I've prepared. First up, there are two ways to select tracks. You can scroll through them with the encoder, or just use the dedicated track buttons. These buttons let you select tracks no matter which mode you're in. To mute a track, simply press the corresponding pad. If track is held while pressing a pad, the mute becomes global, meaning the track will be muted across all sequences. Once a track is selected, clicking the encoder will open the context menu, allowing you to set the layout, copy, paste and clear the track. Holding a track button will open the track configuration menu. We'll be coming back to this menu often throughout the video, but for now, just note that the track-specific settings are grouped here. Finally, you can see that for now, we are only using tracks that output notes, meaning single voice layouts. The real power of Hermod Plus lies in its ability to be configured to suit any needs you might have in a Eurorack setup, so let's dive into it. It's time to create our first layout. The layout creation tool is accessible via the context menu or by pressing X from the main page. Let's start with the basic two voices layout. One voice for handling notes and another dedicated to modulation. You can see that both of those voices are labeled 4, meaning that they belong to track 4. The first voice still has the note I programmed earlier. Changing a track's layout won't erase its events, so feel free to experiment as you can always go back to the previous layout. Let's generate a random modulation on the second voice and link it to the 303 cutoff input so we can hear it. Let me show you a couple of useful settings here. Hold the track button to access the voice options and enter the CV out section. Here, you can set the output voltage range of your modulation. It ranges from -5 to +5 volts and the polarity can be inverted. This is also where I can set a different standard for my note output. Those options makes it possible for bootleg users or anyone working with vintage synths to use Hermod Plus as a sequencer for their setup. Now, some of you may have noticed that one gate output is still unused. To make use of a remaining gate output on a modulation track, enter Step Mode and tap the track button to toggle between mod and gate editing. Now you can simply place some gate events and use them to trigger things in your system. Nice! Now that you know how to create a layout, let's see how to use MIDI tracks. Let's do a quick rundown of the tracks I've got here. The 8 tracks currently shown are my 8 CV gate tracks. They correspond to the first 8 pads and are accessible via the 8 track buttons here. This first track is the sub-bass, played by the BIA. The second track is sending a lead melody into the plates. Then I've got Atlantis handling the harmonies, and the 303 playing a second melodic line. CV gate tracks can also be set to send MIDI if needed, but Hermod Plus also gives you 8 dedicated MIDI tracks, which are represented by the bottom 8 pads. Scroll the encoder until you reach the MIDI tracks, or just press track to toggle between CV gate and MIDI tracks. Now, those 8 MIDI tracks are displayed on the screen, and the 8 track buttons let me select them. My kick is on MIDI track 1, sending MIDI to Rample, with the snare and hi-hats on MIDI tracks 2 and 3. Each track can store notes and includes 4 modulation lanes, and can be routed to any MIDI output. Let me show you how to set a track's MIDI output. Hold the track button and select MIDI out. Then, choose the port and channel for that track's output. That is also where you set the destinations for the 4 modulation lanes. Let's do that now while we're in the menu. Now, hold step and press buttons 5 to 8 to select one of the modulation lanes. Holding step and pressing Y lets me generate some random modulation events. This one's routed to a CC message controlling the pitch parameter on Rample. And this second one is linked to the beats parameter. Regular CV gate tracks can also be routed to MIDI. Simply go to the track options and select output. Okay, it's time to connect an external keyboard to our system to take advantage of the expressiveness it will bring to our playing. Let's plug in the Osmose and see how it works. By default, the active track settings lets you play incoming MIDI on whichever track is currently selected. To access that setting, go to Global Settings and open MIDI In. From there, you can choose the port and channel for the input. In this example, I disabled that option and instead route the MIDI input directly to a specific track. Don't forget to save your settings if you want them to be restored at the next startup. Then I'll go into Track Settings, open the MIDI In menu and set the correct port and channel for this track. While we're here, let's also assign a CC message for the modulation lane. We'll use that later on. Now let's create a layout. I'll go with a 3-voice mono plus aftertouch plus modulation layout to get the most out of Osmose's expressivity. I'm setting the Osmose to classic keyboard mode. I'll also configure pressure to be sent on CC10 and leave aftertouch set to channel pressure. I can now route those modulation signals to the 303. The expressivity data is now recorded into the modulation lanes and we play back with the loop. Let me show you a little trick that can be super useful. In the settings for MIDI track 8, I'll activate the transpose option. Notice how the screen now shows transpose leader. I'm now setting this track to respond to the Osmose via MIDI. Any notes sent from MIDI track 8, whether played live or recorded, will now transpose the other tracks. You probably noticed we lost the drums for a second. That's because drum sounds responds to specific MIDI notes. So I just need to disable transposition for those drum tracks. There we go. In this last part, I'll demonstrate how to use a polyphonic layout. First, let's change the layout of track 1 to a 4-voice polyphonic layout. As you can see, the tracks are now linked and will respond to any incoming notes from track 1. You can choose between different polyphony allocation modes, which define how voice stealing works. The manual explains each one in detail. We'll stick with the default one for now. I'll just add a touch of quantization. And I think we're done. As always, congrats if you made it this far into the video. Feel free to drop any question or suggestions in the comments. And see you soon for the final episode in this series, which will be all about sec mode.